It's 1950, and the music world is about to crack wide open. A quiet electronics tinkerer from Southern California, a man who never learned to play guitar himself, is about to change everything. Leo Fender wasn't interested in fancy woodworking traditions or the delicate craftsmanship that defined guitar making for generations. He saw an instrument that needed to be louder, tougher, and accessible to working musicians who couldn't afford the expensive carved guitars dominating the market. What he created was a revolution wrapped in wood and wire, a design so perfect that 70 years later, it remains the benchmark every other electric guitar is measured against. This is the story of how Fender's greatest creation became immortal. Leo Fender ran a radio repair shop in Fullerton, California. Throughout the late 1930s and early 1940s, he fixed amplifiers, tinkered with speakers, and listened to musicians complain about their instruments. The hollow body guitars of that era had a fatal flaw. When amplified, they howled with feedback. They were beautiful, sure, but impractical for the loud, energetic music that was starting to bubble up from the American South and West. Leo, with his practical engineer's mind, saw the solution clearly. A solid body would eliminate feedback. Bolt the neck on instead of gluing it, and you could replace it if it warped. Use simple, mass-producible parts, and suddenly working musicians could afford professional-grade instruments. In 1950, Fender introduced what would first be called the Esquire, then the Broadcaster, before finally settling on the Telecaster in 1951. This was the world's first mass-produced solid-body electric guitar. The design was almost brutally simple. A flat slab of ash or pine for the body, a bolt-on maple neck, 2 single-coil pickups, and a bridge that could be adjusted for each string. It looked like something you'd build in a workshop, which is exactly what Leo intended. The Telecaster sold for $189.50, a price that put professional instruments within reach of session players, country pickers, and the kids who would soon invent rock and roll. The sound was unlike anything guitarists had heard before. Bright, cutting, with a piercing high end and thick mid-range that could slice through any mix. It was loud enough to compete with drums and bass without distorting into mush. Western swing players grabbed them first, then blues musicians, then everyone else. The guitar became a workhorse, reliable and tough enough to survive smoke-filled clubs, long tours, and the occasional impact with the stage floor. Even today, a modern Telecaster looks almost identical to those first models from 1951. Leo Fender got it right the first time. By 1953, Leo was already sketching something more sophisticated. The Telecaster was selling well, but competitors like Gibson had introduced the Les Paul, a more upscale instrument with a carved top and fancy finish. Fender needed something that could compete in the premium market, while still maintaining the company's practical philosophy. Working with draftsman Freddie Tavares, and taking suggestions from Western swing guitarist Bill Carson, Leo began designing what would become the Stratocaster. Introduced in 1954, the Stratocaster was everything the Telecaster wasn't. Where the Tele was angular and plain, the Strat had flowing contours that hugged a player's body. The double cutaway design meant easier access to the highest frets. It had 3 pickups instead of 2, offering more tonal variety. The tremolo system, while not the first, was more responsive and reliable than anything before it. The body was sculpted with belly and forearm contours that made it comfortable to play for hours. It came in a 2-tone sunburst finish that looked expensive, sophisticated, almost luxurious. The Stratocaster represented a quantum leap in guitar design. Every curve, every angle, every feature served a purpose. The extended horns balanced the instrument perfectly when worn with a strap. The 3-pickup configuration, wired through a 3-position switch that players quickly learned to wedge into in between positions, created an array of tones that ranged from glassy and bell-like to warm and full. The tremolo arm, which Fender called a synchronized tremolo, allowed pitch bending and vibrato effects that would become essential to rock guitar. It was revolutionary, futuristic, and somehow timeless all at once. What made both guitars truly revolutionary was Leo's manufacturing philosophy. Traditional luthier carved guitars by hand, a time-consuming process that made each instrument expensive and slightly different. Leo designed his guitars to be assembled from interchangeable parts. The bolt-on neck meant if you broke it, you could replace it. The pick guard held most of the electronics, making repairs simple. Every part was designed to be produced efficiently and assembled quickly. This approach horrified traditional guitar makers, but it democratized the electric guitar. Suddenly, session players, working musicians, and ambitious kids could afford instruments that sounded professional, but a great design means nothing without great players to unlock its potential. And that's where the legend truly begins. When Jimi Hendrix arrived in London in September 1966, he brought with him a right-handed Fender Stratocaster that he played upside down to accommodate his left-handed style. What happened next changed music forever. Hendrix reimagined what the instrument could do. He coaxed sounds from it that seemed impossible, using the tremolo arm to create dive bombs and swoops, cranking his amplifiers until they howled with feedback, then controlling that chaos with precision. He played behind his back with his teeth, and most famously, set his Strat on fire at the Monterey Pop Festival in 1967. Nearly every significant recording and performance in Hendrix's career featured a Stratocaster. From the volcanic eruption of Purple Haze to the delicate beauty of A Little Wing, from the apocalyptic Star-Spangled Banner at Woodstock to the cosmic voyage of Voodoo Child, the Stratocaster was his voice. As his family would later say, Jimi is Fender and Fender is Jimi. That Olympic white Strat with its maple neck became more than an instrument. It became a symbol of possibility, of pushing boundaries, of using the same tools as everyone else, but with imagination and vision that transcended the ordinary. Then there's Eric Clapton and Blackie, perhaps the most famous Stratocaster in history. In 1970, Clapton walked into Showbud Guitar Shop in Nashville and found a rack of 1950s Stratocasters gathering dust in the back room. They were out of fashion, overlooked, selling for just $200 or $300 each. He bought 6 of them. After giving 3 away to George Harrison, Pete Townshend and Steve Winwood, Clapton took the remaining 3 guitars and assembled one perfect instrument from their best parts. He called it Blackie because of its black finish. Clapton played Blackie on stage and in the studio for 15 years. He called it a remarkable guitar and said it had become part of him. The neck wore thin from constant playing, the frets ground down, the finish worn away to bare wood in spots from his hands and sweat. When asked what made it special, Clapton said it was the fact that he made it himself, taking the best components and creating something personal. In 2004, he sold Blackie at auction for $959,500 to benefit his Crossroads Center. It remains one of the most expensive guitars ever sold. The guitar served as the template for Clapton's signature Stratocaster, which he still plays today. Keith Richards tells another story. In 1971, he acquired a butterscotch 1953 Telecaster that became his main guitar for years. Richards being Richards, he modified it heavily. He installed a humbucker pickup backwards at the bridge, removed one saddle to accommodate his 5-string open G tuning, and basically rebuilt the guitar to match his vision. That beat-up Telecaster, which he called Micawber, defined the Rolling Stones' sound through their most creative period. The guitar's bright, cutting tone became synonymous with rock and roll itself. Jeff Beck said the Fender Stratocaster was made for him, that it's the tool for rock and roll. Jason Isbell called the Telecaster probably the best guitar design of all time because of how durable and versatile it is. Steve Cropper used a Telecaster to create some of the most celebrated recordings of the 1960s, from Green Onions to Sitting on the Dock of the Bay. Buddy Holly was one of the first major rock and roll stars to embrace the Stratocaster, influencing everyone who came after. The list goes on. Stevie Ray Vaughan, David Gilmour, John Frusciante, Kurt Cobain, Prince. Every genre, every style, every generation has found something in these instruments. So why do these guitars still rule after 70 years? Leo Fender accidentally created perfection. Not the perfection of ornate craftsmanship or exotic materials, but the perfection of purpose. The basic Stratocaster and Telecaster designs are so fundamentally correct that they've required almost no changes. Modern Fenders use better materials, more consistent manufacturing, improved electronics, but the core design remains unchanged because it doesn't need to change. They're versatile enough to handle any genre. A Telecaster can play country twang in the morning, blues at night, and punk rock after midnight. A Stratocaster moves seamlessly from Hendrix's psychedelic explorations to Clapton's blues, from surf music to metal. They're built to be repaired and modified. Guitarists have been hot rodding Fenders since day one, swapping pickups, changing hardware, making each instrument uniquely theirs. They're affordable at every level, from budget models that sound surprisingly good to custom shop masterpieces, and they're tough. These guitars survive decades of abuse and keep playing. The design has influenced every electric guitar that came after it. Even Gibson, Fender's chief rival, had to respond to the Telecaster's success by creating the Les Paul. The entire modern electric guitar industry exists because Leo Fender, a guy who couldn't play guitar, looked at the instrument with fresh eyes and asked better questions than the people who'd been building guitars for generations. 70 years later, walk into any music store, any recording studio, any concert venue in the world, and you'll see Fenders. They're the default, the standard, the guitar you grab when you need something that just works. They've accompanied every major musical movement since rock and roll began. They've been to Woodstock and Monterey, to tiny clubs and massive stadiums, into recording studios where they've laid down tracks that defined generations. They've been in the hands of legends and in the hands of kids just learning their first chords. Leo built guitars for working musicians, instruments that could take a beating and keep sounding great. He made them affordable and repairable. He ignored tradition and focused on function. And somehow, those practical decisions created instruments so perfect in their balance of form, function, and sound that they've remained essentially unchanged for 7 decades. In an industry obsessed with the next big thing, Fender's greatest creations prove that sometimes you can't improve on perfection. If you loved diving into the story of how one man's practical vision changed music forever, hit that like button and subscribe to Verisium for more deep dives into the instruments, artists, and moments that shaped rock and blues. Drop a comment and tell us about your own Fender story. What's your favourite Telecaster or Stratocaster moment in music history? We'll see you in the next one.